Good afternoon and welcome to the regular meeting of the City of Glendale Commission on the Status of Women. Roll call, please.
Chair Burns.
Present.
Commissioner Kojayan.
Present.
Ex officio Kim.
Present.
Commissioner Lal.
Present.
Commissioner Lambalati.
Present.
Vice Chair Miller.
Present.
Ex officio Serrano.
Present.
Thank you, Ms. Powers. Next item on the agenda, please.
Sure. At 1A, we have the report regarding the posting of the agenda. The agenda for the May 11, 2015 meeting was posted on the bulletin board outside of City Hall on or before May 8, 2015.
Thank you. The next thing on the agenda, please.
At 2, under introductions and presentations, A is introduction of new Commissioner Diane Lambalot.
Diane, welcome.
Thank you.
We're very excited to have you, and perhaps everyone in television land would like to hear a little bit about you.
Mike, sorry.
I'm Diane Lambalot. I'm an attorney. I've lived in Glendale for about 16 years now, and I'm very pleased to be part of the commission. Thank you very much.
Thank you. The next item on the agenda, please.
Chair Burns, thank you.
Yes.
I would like to welcome and congratulate. Can I do it now or in the comments?
Anytime you want.
Okay. I would like to welcome to board and congratulations, Commissioner Lambalot. I know with your experience and each one of us different experience we have, all together, I think we can reach our goal. Welcome and congratulations.
Thank you very much. Appreciate it.
Thank you. The next item on the agenda, please.
At B, we have introduction of new student ex officios Regina Kim and Pauline Serrano.
Welcome, Regina Kim, and welcome, Pauline Serrano. Would you like to tell us a little bit about yourself?
Sure. I have lived in Glendale for the past 14 years. I am currently 16 years old. I attend Hoover High School as a junior. I am junior class president, and I was just recently elected ASB president, and I'm very excited to have that role to take on for next year and to be a part of such an amazing commission this year.
We're excited to have you.
Thank you.
And welcome. Would you like to tell us a bit about yourself?
Sure. I'm Regina Kim. I go to Glendale High School, and I'm currently in the 11th grade. I've been living in Glendale for, I think, 12 years, and I'm really excited to contribute my opinions and what I can do for women in Glendale in this commission. Thank you.
We're excited to have you. I know that you and I met with these young ladies, and we were very impressed with both of them, weren't we?
I think the future of Glendale is definitely secure if you two are only just two of the wonderful young women that we met when we were doing those interviews. It was very heartening. It's very heartening. So welcome, and we're really looking forward to working with you.
Thank you. The next item on the agenda, please.
Sure. At C, we have the City Attorney's Office making a presentation of the Brown Act, and Lucy Varpetian, our attorney, is here to make that presentation for us.
Good evening, and thank you for the opportunity to speak with you about the Brown Act. We periodically like to bring the Brown Act to each of the commissions just so there's a reminder of the requirements as it relates to public meetings. Please feel free to stop me if you have questions, and I'm happy to answer them. And if you don't want to do it tonight, you can certainly reach out to me, call me, and I can help answer those questions then. The Brown Act controls all meetings of the legislative body, and we've got a PowerPoint. You should have a copy of it to follow along. But all meetings of a legislative body of a local agency shall be open to the public, and all persons shall be permitted to attend any meeting of the legislative body of a local agency except as otherwise permitted in this chapter. And so what is a legislative body? Obviously, it's the City Council. You've seen those meetings televised, but also commissions, boards, or committees created by formal action of the City Council. Those are all considered to be legislative bodies. committees that are created by this commission would also be considered a legislative body unless it's an ad hoc committee. And we'll talk a little bit about what an ad hoc committee is in a little bit. And so what is a meeting? It's a congregation at the same time and place by a majority of the... I need to be moving this along, and I'm not doing that. Let's see. So we just covered the Brown Act, legislative body. Okay. The Act governs meetings, and that is a meeting is a congregation at the same time and place of a majority of the members of the commission, and that's when you come together to hear, discuss, or deliberate on an item that is within your subject matter jurisdiction. Now, this would cover serial meetings as well. So serial meetings are prohibited by the Brown Act. And a serial meeting is the use of intermediaries and technological devices such as emails or texting or other forms of communications employed by a majority to develop a collective concurrence as to an action to be taken. That is prohibited by the Brown Act. So you cannot utilize email or an individual to have a discussion amongst yourselves outside the presence of the public, outside this setting, to come to a determination on something that is within the subject matter jurisdiction of your of the commission, and that is a collective, a majority. So less than a majority is okay, but a majority and anything more than a majority is not okay. What are serial meetings? An example of that would be where Commissioner A speaks to Commissioner B, and then Commissioner B speaks to Commissioner C. Now you've gone to the majority number. The magic number for this commission that creates a majority is 3. So once you get to that third commissioner, then you've got a violation of the Brown Act. So the example of that is the hub and spoke example, where one member speaks to another member and then speaks to the third member. There's also the intermediary example, where you have a conversation with the staff members or a member of the public, and you say, this is what I'm thinking about this topic, and then that person says to you, well, I spoke with Commissioners B and C, and here's what their opinion was, and this is the direction that they're going into. So it's now incumbent on you to stop that discussion and not further it, so that you don't have that third person acting as an intermediary. So sometimes what will happen is you'll bring information back to staff, for example, and because she's had an opportunity to speak with a number of you, she can't tell you what the others have said. It's not because she doesn't want to, it's because we don't want to act as the intermediary and then take that number over to a majority versus just maybe 2 people. So what is an action that's taken? It's a collective decision. It's a collective commitment or promise to act on something in the future, or it's an actual vote when you're sitting as a body. So that is what the Brown Act considers is action that's taken. We really do want to stress the point of conversations in an email which advance or clarify members' understanding of an issue. These are all things that can occur in an email setting, facilitate an agreement or compromise among the members, or advance the ultimate resolution of an issue. All of these things, you could see how they can easily happen in an email. We want to caution you that that's something that you want to stay away from. So be careful when you're doing a reply all on an email, or you're sending an email to more than one other person. You just want to be careful not to do that, because then now you're in a territory where you're violating the Brown Act. I've got a few more examples of these, and that's where committee member A sends an email to committee member B. I think I'm going to vote a particular way on this issue. What about you? So those are things that you just want to stay away from. There was a case called Wolf versus City of Fremont. Individual briefings, and this happens, this is what is permissible, individual briefings by a staff member with each commissioner is okay. But so long as that staff person does not then tell you what the other commissioners are doing. So if you've got a particular issue that's coming up and you need further information or clarification, it's okay for each of you to sit individually with staff and have a conversation about what that means. But you have to keep in mind that when she doesn't then share with you what the other commissioners have said, it's because it's prohibited by the Brown Act. So the key is avoiding developing a collective concurrence either directly or through a conduit, and that includes people or devices, technological devices. As staff, do not disclose the views and positions of elected or other appointed officials. So, and again, we try to stress that because sometimes email is so easy that we forget. So we just want to make sure that you remember that. Again, the slippery slope of communications, use of emails amongst committee members and or staff can create a potential slippery Brown Act slope. What is not a meeting? So these are all things we've been talking about what it is that you cannot do. Here are things that are okay to do. So sometimes there are conferences that are open to the public where general issues are discussed. It's perfectly okay for multiple commissioners or the entire commission to attend a public conference and participate in that conference. And you'll see that there are a number of, I think later in the agenda, there's an opportunity for commissioners to participate in statewide or nationwide commissions, and so long as it's a conference that's open to the public where general issues are discussed, it's okay for the entire commission to attend that. Community organized meetings that are open and publicized. There are a number of other organizations in the community that each of you are active in. It's okay to attend those. You don't have to run as soon as you see two other commissioners at another community function. So perfectly okay to do that. Individual contacts with third persons. It's actually a good thing to reach out and see what other women in the community or what other issues, women's issues, are relevant in the community. It's okay to speak with third persons about issues that are within the subject matter jurisdiction of this commission. So third persons, not commissioners, but members of the public. That's okay to do individually. Attendance at open noticed meetings of another local agency or other board. Cannot discuss among yourselves issues of specific nature on a scheduled program. So if there's another Brown Act body and they are discussing issues that is within your subject matter jurisdiction, it's okay to attend those, but so long as you don't get together at the end and have a conversation about something that is within the subject matter jurisdiction of this commission. So you have to be careful about that. Social or ceremonial occasions are okay, and obviously less than a quorum. And again, that for this commission means 2. 3 is the majority, and that's not okay. 2 is okay. So we've been talking about why we do this. You have to keep in mind that the idea behind the Brown Act is to allow the public to participate in our meetings. And because of that, we are required to provide notice of the meetings at a place that is accessible to the public so they can attend, so they can review our agenda and decide whether or not they'd like to come and participate in the meeting itself. So because of that, the Brown Act requires that we provide some very specific things on a notice. So all our regular meetings, and we're going to establish those dates later in the agenda, all regular meetings have to be noticed at least 72 hours in advance. There is a provision that allows for special meetings. That requirement is less time. 24-hour notice is required for special meetings. emergency meetings, which this body will probably never deal with, require 1 hour notice to news and the media that's requesting it. That usually comes up in the city council setting where you've got some major emergency, mudslides or earthquakes, and the council has to adopt a resolution or a proclamation declaring an emergency. So the Brown Act allows for that type of an event to take place. Again, that's not something that this commission will deal with, at least that I can foresee. So then the meeting notice must be posted in a place accessible to the public. The location has to be accessible to the public 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. That for us is the bulletin board outside City Hall, and you'll note that at the beginning of every agenda there's a report regarding the posting of the agenda, and we will state when it was that we posted that meeting's agenda on the bulletin board outside City Hall. We also post that on the city website. So the public has an opportunity to request copies of that. They must provide, if there's a written request for that, then we must provide a mailed copy of the agenda in the packet to anyone requesting it. And that request has to be in writing, and it's good for a year. But nowadays, with all of the information being posted on the website, I don't know that many people avail themselves of that particular provision of the Brown Act, but it's there in case they have no access. So what's required to be on the agenda, and we take some time in trying to determine what gets on the agenda, and sometimes you'll hear I'm generally pretty silent throughout these meetings until I see that maybe we are veering off course of the topic that is posted on the agenda. And again, the idea behind that is if someone took a look at the agenda and decided that they wanted to participate or not participate, we can't get off the agenda, because that would mean that they didn't have the requisite notice to attend the meeting. So I will sometimes say, we've gone off the agenda, we need to come back and stick to the topic that is on the agenda. So what's required to be on the agenda is a brief general description of each item to be discussed or transacted. And again, it must be posted in an accessible place. But basically what it means is that in about 20 words or so, we need to describe what action it is that we are going to, what is it that we're going to discuss and what action we're going to take. And again, the purpose behind that is so that the public has adequate notice to decide if they would like to attend the meeting and participate in what is being discussed. So discussions on matters not on the agenda is prohibited. There is an exception, and you will find that on our agenda, it is towards the end, it's item number 6, Commissioner and Staff Comments. This is an opportunity for brief announcements or responses to comments or questions. You have to keep this in mind, because brief announcements basically means items that are relevant to this commission. So somebody's birthday party last weekend, not relevant to the commission, but could have been a fun party, not relevant to the commission. So you want to keep the announcements relevant to the commission. You want to keep in mind that this is not an opportunity for a discussion amongst the commissioners. Again, this is sometimes where I pipe up and I say, you've got to keep your comments brief, because if you have a lengthy discussion, then that means we're depriving the public of the opportunity to attend and participate in that discussion. This would also be a chance for you to request that items be placed on a future agenda. And that's how we would bring things back and actually put it on the agenda and give the public the notice to participate in that item. Need to act, the other exception is the need to act immediately on matter that arose after the posting of the agenda. Again, this is something that I think generally would not come up in the context of this commission. The way we would generally deal with that sometimes, say for example, someone wants to give the commission a grant, and that comes up after the posting of the agenda. The best way for us probably to deal with that would be to arrange for a special meeting and, sometime shortly after the regular meeting, and then have a discussion of that at that point. So those are the two exceptions to items that are not on the agenda where we can actually discuss it. So the public's access, again, these are things that we generally don't worry about in this commission because all our meetings are held at this location, but we cannot require conditional attendance. We cannot say you must state your name. Someone can attend the meeting and choose to speak anonymously, for example. So we cannot require attendance on any prerequisite or condition to participate. The public must have the opportunity to address the legislative body. We have a spot for that. That is item 3 on our agenda. And what you will find is that if someone wants to speak on a specific item on the agenda, then they do that during that agenda item. But other item, if it's not on the agenda, then the opportunity for the public to address this body would be during oral comment. The comments, again, must be general issues of interest within the jurisdiction of the body. So sometimes that's, again, where I will jump in and say this is outside the purview of this particular commission. You may want to take your comments to the city council. That may be a more appropriate place for a discussion. And the other part of that is the public must have the opportunity to address the body on the agenda items before. During the consideration of the item, we can impose time limits. I think we generally do limit it to 5 minutes, but the idea is that you want to take the public's comments into consideration before actually coming to a final determination of before making up your own minds as to what direction you're going to go. And again, can be limited if already addressed by a body or committee of members of the legislative body. Again, this generally doesn't come up for us. Public may criticize the policies, procedures, programs, or services of the agency or the commission, rather, in this case. We suggest we've added the thick skin rule. You've got to know that not everyone will agree with some of the programs that you propose, and that could open you up to some criticism. So you just want to know that it's not a personal sort of a criticism, but more of a criticism of the legislative body itself. The members of the public may tape or broadcast any portion of the meeting or comments of a commissioner, but so long as they do that without being disruptive at the meeting. So the records of this commission must be available to the public. Again, all of that is to encourage participation on the part of the public. So you'll find that as soon as we disseminate information to the commission, we will also upload the same information on the website and have it readily available in the city clerk's office for the public. Unless it's exempted by law, there's some closed session requirements. Again, probably won't come up with this commission. But if we disseminate something to commissioners, just like the PowerPoint that we distributed to everyone tonight, we must also make the same available to the public. And so we generally make that available in the back of the room. And if we get you information within the 72-hour period, so after we've given you the packets, we've got to make those available. They're generally available, again, on our website and then also in the city clerk's office. They must be available in alternate formats upon request. Meetings are generally held in this location. I think it would be rare if we were moved, but it could happen. But sometimes the commission hosts other events that are maybe at the library because you want greater accessibility by the public. So when we have those types of programs, of course, we advertise for that as well, but we have jurisdictional limits, and so all of our meetings happen in the city of Glendale. If you are unable to attend the meeting but you would still like to participate, we can allow for that so long as we have a majority here. But you can call in if this is what you'd like to do, but you have to keep in mind that the posting requirements that we have here will also have to be at your location. So if you are going to be in, Sacramento, but you still want to participate in the meeting that's happening here, then we will need to make sure that the hotel or the place where you're staying posts outside their door the agenda, and that the public still has the opportunity to participate at that remote location as well. So you want to keep that in mind if you're physically unable to attend one of our meetings. Meetings must meet the protections and prohibitions of the ADA. Secret ballots are prohibited. You'll find that we'll generally do a roll call vote, or sometimes we'll say, is there a unanimous consensus? And so all of the vote happens here, and it's always televised. Closed sessions, this is something that the City Council deals with. I'm going to just quickly read them and let you know that none of them will apply to you. You should know that there is an opportunity for a closed session, but it's very, very limited to these specific areas: litigation, labor negotiations, real estate negotiations, threat to public facilities or public access, threat to public services, gas and electric, public employee appointment, employment, performance and discipline, and disclosure of confidential communications. All of that is unlawful. So this commission will not have an opportunity for a closed session, but it is permissible under the Brown Act. There are some pretty hefty penalties for violations of the Brown Act, and you need to be aware of them. They are, especially the criminal penalties for intentional deprivation of information to the public. It's considered a misdemeanor, and it's unique to you. So you want to be aware of that and not violate the Brown Act. There are curative provisions, and it's a little bit involved. I'm not going to get into that specifically. There could be civil action, and then ultimately attorney's fees if we are found to be violative of the Brown Act. So it's an important part of state legislature, and really the idea behind it is to make sure that we give as much access to the public as possible so that we can get as much participation as possible. So that is it for my presentation, and I haven't had no questions, so maybe I spoke too much.
Are there any questions? I have one. If we're sued, are we protected?
How do you mean that? If you have intentionally violated the Brown Act, if someone alleges a violation of the Brown Act, our office will look into it. If it's an intentional violation of the Brown Act, then you may want to consider speaking with a personal attorney, because now it becomes a personal liability on your part.
Thank you. What is next on the agenda?
Sorry. At 3 is oral comment, and there are no speaker cards. Chair Burns.
Then this item is closed. The next item on the agenda, please.
Under 4 is consent items, and A is the approval of the minutes of the regular commission meeting held on October 13th, 2014. This is a meeting that all of the commissioners were present at except for Commissioner Lambalot, so she can abstain. But it's there for your.
I make a motion to approve the minutes for October 13th.
I second it.
Roll call, please.
Commissioner Kajayan?
Yes.
Commissioner Law?
Yes.
Commissioner Lambolat? Vice Chair Miller?
Yes.
Chair Burns?
Yes.
Okay, this passes, thank you. At B is approval of the minutes of the special commission meeting held on March 9, 2015.
Are there any changes that the commission would like to make to the minutes? Or is there a motion to approve the minutes as presented?
I make a motion to approve the minutes as presented for the meeting of March 9th.
I second it.
Roll call, please.
Commissioner Kajayan?
Yes. Yes.
Commissioner Law?
Yes.
Commissioner Lambolat?
Yes.
Vice Chair Miller?
Yes.
Chair Burns?
Yes.
Thank you.
Next item on the agenda, please.
At 5, we have business agenda, and A is action items. Item 1 is consideration and discussion regarding the Commission on the Status of Women's quarterly meeting calendar, and at A is a motion to approve the Commission's quarterly meeting schedule through 2015. Would you care for a brief report?
Yes, thank you, Ms. Powers.
Now that the Commission is meeting on a quarterly rather than monthly basis, staff is essentially, with this report, recommending setting a schedule for the duration of the 2015 calendar year, and if you so choose, Ms. Varpetian will go into it, we can set it on an ongoing basis as well. And we'd like to maintain some consistency with the date and time of the meetings. So for the purpose of the remaining 2 quarterly meetings of 2015, the recommendations are keeping them at the second Monday of the quarter, as we have been in the past. So that would be Monday, August 10th, and then Monday, November 9th. Should we move forward to set an entire calendar year, we can do February, May, August, and November, the second Monday of the month, and that way we can just do this all in one fell swoop. When you're considering the dates, staff also asks that the Commission also provide direction regarding meeting times for our meetings. In the past, meetings have been held at 5:30 p.m., but there are a lot of board and commissions that meet a little bit earlier in the afternoon. The afternoons of the dates that the Commission would regularly meet are available, and that essentially is the report. Questions?
Thank you. This item is open for discussion now.
You mean we have a chance to change the time from 5:30, like after like lunch, or like around 2, or is it possible we can make the change?
That's possible, Commissioner Kojayan. Keep in mind that we have 2 student commissioners, so I would defer to them as to how, that would just be something to take into consideration, how much earlier we can meet. There is an opportunity, but I would defer to the students too, to maybe let us know what a regular student schedule looks like.
My last period would be ending at 3:05, so anytime, maybe around 4 would be the best time. That'd be the earliest for me.
Same for me. School ends at 3:10.
Is city staff available at 4 on those days?
Yes.
When we're talking about a 4 p.m., we're also talking about Monday, correct?
Yes, we would. So it would essentially be keeping it on the second Monday of the quarters, and the quarters we can identify as, in the report we had mentioned August and November, and I think Ms. Varpetian just recently pointed out to me that we can go ahead and set them for February and May and just kind of have that in perpetuity and have it be the second Monday of the month, which is keeping in line with when the Commission would regularly meet, and doing it for those particular months.
Are there any more?
And the only comment is that this is setting your regular meeting schedule. It does not account for special meetings, so you could set those as you go and you find a time that's convenient, that's mutually agreeable by everyone. But as far as the regular meetings go, there would be 4 times a year, and at a time of your choosing.
Is there any more discussion about the time of the meeting?
Are we going to vote on it? Because then I'm I happen to be fully employed somewhere else, and that particular date coincides with exactly something that I particularly offer. So it would be a hardship, but if it so moves the entire commission and that's the way you vote, then that's the way we vote. It would be a hardship. I also question how the public, if the public wanted to come and ask us questions, what that would be like for them. And then lastly, I wonder if it's just, we've had so many changes in the past year, if we could just perhaps look at 2015 and keeping things as they are on the date and time for these 2 dates you have listed, and then let this commission revisit it at a different time once we're back on our feet and we know where we're going. Is just an option perhaps to consider.
Both of the meetings that we have looked at, Monday, August 10th, also a Monday, November 9th. So we're looking at both of those meetings in 2015 on a Monday.
Yes.
At this point, we were looking at a 5:30, and then there was, I think we needed to consider whether we moved those meetings up it sounds to me like the earliest we could have this meeting would be 4 o'clock. Vice Chair Miller, would you be available at 4 instead of 5:30?
Am I available? It would be a hardship to be available that early. I would literally be jutting one meeting right up to the next, and I would likely be late. Probably, if we want to ask the question differently, the earliest that I could get here where I don't think there's going to be issues would be 5.
Could I add that generally speaking, with my commute and childcare arrangements, 5 o'clock does work a bit better, but I don't want people working around me, but 5 o'clock does work a bit better with my job and having to take care of my kids.
Well, basically, that's 1/2 hour earlier than we have it now. It perhaps seems to me that we just leave it at 5:30 for those two, August 10th and November 9th. We can revisit again, can we not? Although these spaces might be taken up when we revisit in 2016.
To be honest, Chair Burns, I don't anticipate that happening, given that other commissions typically have their schedule set.
Surely.
Unless they decide to move a special meeting. Sometimes that does happen. I know GWP Commission holds their meetings on Mondays, and sometimes when there's a Monday holiday, they sometimes dip into a different Monday, but that could happen, but chances are slim.
Is there any more discussion? May I have a motion for this item then?
Just for clarification, if I may, are you voting on the 2 days that are being proposed for August and November, or are you voting for the second Monday for the months of May, August, November, and February?
I thought it was February.
February, May, August, November. Those would be the 4 regular meeting days, not limiting it to just the 2015 calendar. So the meetings would be on the second Monday of those 4 months at 5:30, and at some later time, should you choose to discuss the time, we can certainly bring that back again and have you have a conversation about that. But it may be that you don't want to discuss that in the next 2 meetings. At least you've established your meeting calendar, and there's the predictability on the part of the public as to when your meetings are going to be set.
I have a question, if I may, Chair Burns.
Vice Chair Miller?
The question being, if I heard correctly, if the entire dais, half could get here at 2, but everybody seemed like they could get here at 5, and there's no opposition to that, why did we decide to leave as is?
Because you asked to have everything left the same and not change anything for a while.
Okay, well, let me re-clarify the statement that I intended to make. The statement I intended to make is, if the question was asked the earliest I could get here, which I appreciate the commission looking at that, the earliest I could get here is 5 p.m., of which I've heard Commissioner Law indicate that would work better for her. So I'm wondering if we might just want to take a vote on the second Monday at 5 p.m. and perhaps make it work for everybody for the remainder of 2015.
Well, that would be the two meetings, August 10 and November 9th only.
Correct. Yeah.
So you would not mind changing to 5?
Can I say something? I'm a little concerned about when people are saying it's the earliest I could get here. I mean, I think it's better to build in a little cushion there. I know my commute is from downtown, and at that time it's pretty iffy, so I'd prefer to leave it at 5:30. I don't think the half hour is a big difference. And then we've got the continuity of the meeting time.
Commissioner, are you looking specifically at the August 10th?
And November 9th.
November 9th, and we're not going to go ahead with the other 4 in 2016 at this time?
It's setting a time for the other 4 in 2016. Yes, that's what I'm saying.
May I have a motion on this item?
I move to set the Commission on the Status of Women meetings the second Monday of the month each quarter, starting with today, May 11th, and with the other 2 2015 meetings on Monday, August 10th, and Monday, November 9th at 5:30 p.m. And further move that for 2016, the meetings will be held on the second Monday of the month in February, May, August, and November, a time to be discussed later in the year.
May I have a second?
Yes, I second it.
A roll call, please.
Commissioner Kojayan?
Yes.
Commissioner Law?
Yes.
Commissioner Lambelat?
Yes.
Vice Chair Miller?
Yes.
Chair Burns?
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you.
At 2 is consideration and discussion of the 2015 through 2018 Commission on the Status of Women's Draft Strategic Plan, and at A is a motion to adopt the 2015-2018 Commission on the Status of Women's Draft Strategic Plan.
Could you please provide a report on this item, Ms. Powers?
Gladly. Chair Burns, members of the Commission, the CSW conducted a strategic planning workshop during a special meeting that was held on March 9th of this year. It was attended by all 5 of the commissioners, as well as staff and our 2 strategic planning consultant facilitators. The workshop was conducted with the expectation that commissioners would provide direction on items related to the strategic plan and take final action to adopt the updated strategic plan at a future CSW meeting, which is today. The updated strategic plan will then be submitted to City Council for review and ultimate approval. Dialogue at the strategic planning workshop did emphasize the need for the CSW to function as an advisory board that provides recommendations to City Council regarding policy relevant to the status and well-being of women and girls, and to promote education on issues affecting women and girls in Glendale and create awareness of the need to focus on women and women's issues in the city of Glendale. Within this construct, the following broad themes emerged regarding updated strategic aims and goals for 2015 through 2018. To align aims and goals to remain within the scope of CSW's duties and responsibilities by looking at the Commission's focus of policy considerations, to seek opportunities to increase the level of knowledge in the community regarding women's issues and the status of women in the community, to pursue opportunities to liaise with public and private organizations, and to maximize resources given that CSW will meet on a quarterly rather than monthly basis, and that fundraising and programming activities are no longer a focus of the Commission. So the 2015-18 CSW strategic plan is included in this report as Exhibit 1. It includes review and feedback incorporated by commissioners after the first draft was produced by the consultants. And staff respectfully recommends that the commissioners review, make any necessary changes, and then ultimately adopt the strategic plan that's being presented. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Powers. This item is open for discussion.
I've reviewed the plan and submitted a number of changes to it, mostly more ministerial. And I think that at this point, substantively, it's in good shape, and I think it's in a good position to approve at this point. And we agreed earlier that it could be revisited at some point if we feel it's not meeting our needs or our goals are not completely aligned with it.
Is there any more discussion?
I've reviewed the plan as well, and I agree with you, Commissioner. I do have just a couple of questions regarding specifically under Strategic Aim 1, which is to evaluate and assess. There's a discussion within the strategic plan which really identifies an in-depth understanding of the status and well-being of women and girls, and all of this makes sense. Tangibly, what does that look like? Like, where's the list kept? Who keeps the list?
What page are you on, Commissioner?
What are you
Four.
dealing with right now,
Page
please?
4, under aims and goals, it's the first aim, first goal.
2015 to 2018?
Correct,
And you're looking at the Aim 1, evaluate and assess, okay.
Says gather existing information, identify existing resources. Where would that be kept?
So Vice Chair Miller, members of the commission, that staff's understanding kind of what the discussion was would be putting together some sort of report on women and girls in the city of Glendale. The commission had previously done something similar to this back in 2004, and it was a 2004 to 2006 report that was produced. There's different ways you can go about doing this, but one of the most apparent ways, and one of the ways that I believe the commission could serve the community well, would be some sort of, you're looking at demographics, workforce demographics, education, income, violence against women. There's different points that the commission can discuss to hit, whether it's in the exact same vein as the report that was done about 10 years ago, or if it goes in a different direction. That would be something that the commission could entertain doing. Does that answer the question?
It does, thank you. I'm wondering if, in terms of this particular plan, just identify if it's necessary or unnecessary as we go to approval. My question is, as we go to approval, do we have to put a timeline in there, or can we adopt the plan without that timeline?
Absolutely. The plan can be adopted without the timeline, but at subsequent meetings, the commission can identify how it wants to go about accomplishing the different various strategic aims over the 3-year period that you have. I know one way that this can be done is possibly adopting ad hoc committees of 2, whether it's today or it's at a future meeting, for commissioners to work on certain, identify certain goals and projects that align with the strategic plan and then move forward. So for example, there could be an ad hoc committee to look at how to evaluate and assess and what that sort of report would look like moving forward. So between your quarterly meetings, that would be something that a couple of commissioners could meet, discuss, and work on to be able to provide a report to the commission at the next quarter.
Okay, thank you. Ms. Powers, I have one more question, Chair Burns, on the next aim.
Prior to your asking that, would you mind if I asked something of Commissioner Law? Mount St. Mary's produced a report. Thank you. All right. Okay. We'll deal with that later then. Thank you. I was just hoping you had that.
I have
Thank you.
the overview of it.
Yes.
This is obviously
there is an
not
overview.
The complete thing, but this is the overview.
But the overview then coming into the complete report
Mm-hmm.
would focus on a lot of the things that Glendale would be interested in, I think, and
Yes.
the Women's Commission would be interested in.
Yeah, the issues that are raised in this report are very much aligned with the strategic aims that we've outlined in our plan. So there's a lot of symbiosis between the two and a lot of space where this report can provide the kind of information that we're looking for the commission and then by extension for the citizens.
Thank you very much. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Great. And on strategic aim 3, communication, education, outreach, when we look at the goals that what we aim to do in a strategic plan, which is to maintain visibility, recognize women's accomplishments and contributions in the community, it's page 5, increase the level of knowledge in the community, recommend and support programs. So moving that from an overall theory strategy into actual action items, I'm wondering again, like for example, in our new format and reorganization, is it possible for us as part of our communication, education, outreach, as well as a policy, providing policy recommendations to council, is it possible to have a forum ever at some point where we gather data on information that we take back to council, but we do that specifically with individuals in the city of Glendale who are so interested in attending?
Yes, I don't see why that would be a problem. The commission can definitely also partner with other established organizations to put together such forums. But you can hold educational type of some sort of forum for the public to come and discuss issues. Is that what you're asking?
Or to help us to meet the goals of what is in the strategic plan and what we're now doing under the reorganization. So that what I'm really hoping to put forth, I realize today's just a strategic plan and certainly we can move to a vote, but where I'm going with my comments is, can we, Chair Burns, could we look to a future agenda to really take this strategic plan and map it into a time frame? Or if you're so moved, would you like to appoint an ad hoc committee? I'm really looking for where the action is around this, specifically since we only meet 4 times a year.
Mike?
Basically, we are looking at such a tremendously large change in this commission. We are looking at policy, and there is a definite change for us. And I think what I'm hearing you say is you want us to get on the horse and get going with a lot of things that we are no longer charged with. So I don't understand quite what you want to suggest. Chair Miller?
Okay, let me restate it again, Chair Burns. Specifically, when I'm looking at, we are all in agreement with the strategic plan. We all met, agreeing with what our commissioner said. The substantive value is good, and we want to move forward. So we can move to a vote on that. There's not going to be an issue. But what I'm asking as a piece in there is that we put some discussion, that we revisit this and we put some discussion around time frames. I don't think that my comments were at all to identify that we put a whole gung-ho behind activities or events that we did before. I think change is good and we're all on board with that. But a strategic plan in this new format of policy still has to have action and timeframes and movement behind it, and that's really what my comment is. So I really hope that we can take this, and if we all agree on this, that we move to the next agenda item to put strategy timelines behind it.
Chair Burns, do you mind if I address
Absolutely, go ahead.
Comments by Commissioner Miller?
Chair, Commissioner Law.
I think what I'm hearing you say is that you get the strategy, we're on board with the strategy, we're united with the strategy, but you're looking for tactics, you're looking for action items. And I think that everyone here is in agreement on that, because you can't implement a strategy without tactics, right? You can't implement a strategy without action. So I think, as Ms. Powers raised, we may need to form committees to determine what those action items are going to be, because the 4 meetings per year is not going to be adequate to work out in depth what all of those action items are going to be. I think that's where committees come into play.
And so, thank you, may I respond to
Certainly.
that, Chair Burns?
Certainly.
And so, in tagging on to that comment, my question then was, could we put on the agenda for future timelines around strategy, and or if you're so moved, would you like to appoint ad hoc committees? That's where my question's going. Her mic.
Your mic.
Your mic is on. I don't know what that was.
If we held a forum or something similar to what Commissioner Miller is suggesting, I'm assuming that we cannot use staff to set that up, to take RSVPs, that sort of thing. We would be partnering with another group.
Commissioner Lambelat, that would be ideal based on even my understanding of the capacity at this point. And we can explore it on a limited basis, I think, moving forward. It's a good suggestion, but really it would be incumbent on the commission to take on some of the duties, and also if we can leverage some resources, that would be fantastic. But I don't want to completely rule it out of the question either, because there is value in that.
Thank you.
Is there any further discussion? May I have a motion on this item, please?
I move to approve the strategic plan as written.
I second it.
Roll call, please.
Commissioner Kojayan?
Yes.
Commissioner Long?
Yes.
Commissioner Lambelat?
Yes.
Vice Chair Miller?
Yes.
Chair Burns?
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Chair Miller, I have a question. I was going to ask before the strategic plan, when we were discussing about the time, on the same report, I was going to ask a question to, can I do it now or in the comments?
Certainly, Commissioner Kojayan, go ahead.
It's about the ordinance, the page, section 2, severability. I need some clarification on this previous report.
This is referring to item 1 under
Yes.
the business action agenda item, the exhibit that includes the ordinance for the Commission on the Status of Women. This is going back to a different item, just for clarity.
So that would not be appropriate to ask at this time unless it somehow relates to the strategic planning motion item. It does not?
No.
Okay, so if because we're not on that item, if we're done with the discussion on the item relative to the strategic plan, then we can go back and read the action item number 1 back into the record and have a discussion about that.
Okay.
Ms. Powers, would you do that, please?
Certainly. Reading back into the record, under 5 Business Agenda A action items, 1 is consideration and discussion regarding the Commission on the Status of Women's quarterly meeting calendar.
Commissioner Kojayan.
Okay, on the page of ordinance number 5845, second section. Please, I need some clarification about severability.
All that says is that if, as a result of the change in the ordinance, if one section of it is inconsistent with another section of the Glendale Municipal Code, that you would sever that one section, and that one section would be ineffective rather than the entire ordinance.
I see. Thank you.
Commissioner Kojayan, were you thinking that that word being used would sever the entire commission? or stop the entire commission?
No, I was just
You didn't know what that meant?
Yeah, because I was reading the first section, the meetings, it was understandable, but the second one, I want to know. Okay, thank you.
The next item on the agenda, please.
At 3 is consideration and discussion of transferring the Commission on the Status of Women's fund balance to the Community Foundation of the Verdugos. And at A is a motion providing direction regarding the transfer of $93,100. Would you like a brief report, Chair Burns?
Yes, please.
So one of the conversations that stemmed from the strategic planning meeting a couple of months ago had to do with the Commission's refocusing of efforts as an advisory board and the discontinuation of active fundraising efforts. From this, an idea was brought forward to consider the transfer of the Commission's total fund balance, which is currently at $93,100, to the Community Foundation of the Verdugos, which for the rest of my presentation I will refer to as CFV. By transferring the funds raised by the Commission to the CFV, the Commission can establish a fund that will help women and girls throughout the community. It would be a fund that the CFV can raise awareness of and solicit donations for directly so that members of the community can donate to causes supported by the Commission's mission and values. Most importantly, the CSW will maintain full control of how the funds are spent through formal actions at your Commission meetings here. If the decision is made to transfer the funds to the CFV, there are two options that the Commission has before them. One is to endow the funds, and the other is to transfer them but not endow them. There are advantages, as outlined in the report, as to endowing versus non-endowing, and primarily by endowing, it'll create an ongoing source of funding to further the goals and missions of the CSW by incurring interest and also future donations. According to the foundation staff, people do prefer to donate to endowed funds rather than non-endowed funds. And it should be noted, though, that this would be a permanent endowment according to the CFV. The board is in conversation right now at this time as to the permanency of such a thing, and they are reconsidering whether they should allow their established endowed funds to then revert to non-endowed should the donor, the initial donor, which would be you, the Commission, wants to then revert it to a non-endowed fund. So the answer as of right now, as it stands, is it's permanent. But there is a possibility somewhere down the line, and the Executive Director, Edna Karinsky, is here, and she'll be able to answer any questions. But as of where staff's understanding of this is right now, is that if you endow it now, it's endowed, it's permanent, but there's a chance that that could change. The only benefit apparent to staff at this time of not endowing the funds is that the Commission will not be limited in how much it can spend in a given year. You have in your report the spending cap of 4.5%, and that should you want to one day move the non-endowed balance back to the City of Glendale, that is an option because you can move non-endowed funds back to the city, I believe, and I'll have Ms. Karinsky confirm that. And there are administrative fees that are included in your report, so I'm not quite sure what the administrative fees would be to take a non-endowed fund and move it back to the city, but perhaps Ms. Karinsky can respond to that as well. So at this point, the item before you is to move, whether to move the fund balance to the Community Foundation of the Verdugos, and if so, whether to endow it or not endow it.
And just by way of clarification, that would be a recommendation to the City Council.
Could you ask Edna Karinsky to come up? Hello, friend.
Hello.
How are you?
I am fine. May I approach the...
Please do.
Okay, thank you very much. First of all, I just want to say we're very honored that you would even be considering this. As a community foundation, we are available just to provide those different options in situations such as this that you're discussing. What is the best thing to do with your funding? Maybe where is your future going? As Ms. Powers explained, right now the only options that we do have is an endowed or a non-endowed option. I just wanted to clarify a little bit further that our board has discussed. We have to reevaluate what it is we're offering every few years. And so they have discussed it in the future. There may be a third type of an option. We just don't know what that is. That would involve kind of an in-between non-endowed, but getting the benefits of an endowed fund. But for now, it's an endowed and non-endowed fund. In the future, should we put in a third option, then most likely we would have to then enable our donors to have that chance to see if they may want to switch to another status on their fund. But right now it's either endowed or non-endowed. Now the benefits between the non-endowed and endowed, well, first of all, endowed is permanent right now. But you get the market earnings, so the fund does grow. For a lot of positive reasons that Ms. Powers explained. A non-endowed actually will enable you to have a larger spend rate. So what are some of the goals that you're planning to do as a commission? How much money do you want to grant out? As an endowed fund, you're limited to 4.5%, what we call as a spend rate on your fund, which I think at $93,000 will give you about, I think we calculated $4,100 or thereabouts per year to grant out. That would be at your discretion. How do you want to utilize that funding? If you didn't want to grant anything out, it could stay in the fund and roll over to the next year. The following year, you might have $8,000 that you may wish to use at your discretion on needs in the community. I think one of the important points of discussion that was brought up is perhaps possibly returning the money back to the commission in the future. If you establish this as a non-endowed fund with us, say somewhere down the line, a year or two from now, you would like the money to revert back to the city, that can be done. It's not a problem. I don't think at this point there will be any administrative fees at all. We would just return the money because we take an upfront 6% when you first establish the fund as a non-endowed, as Ms. Powers has outlined up here on this chart on page 3. But to revert the funds back, I don't believe there will be any charge. It would just be a transfer of the funds back. So currently we would just be your fiscal sponsor. Maybe you have other plans that will change, and then we would just, through a formal decision on your end, giving us the instructions that do so, we would return the funds back to you. If it is an endowed fund, however, that's a different story. And as we discussed earlier, currently that would be a permanent fund with us. And unless there were other options that our board will be establishing, say in the future, you're just locked between the two options. I believe, have I answered all the questions, or was there something else?
Please, are there any questions or discussion right now to Ms.
I have.
Karinsky?
Chair Byrne.
Oh, she's beside us.
Okay. I understood that if we put the money in endowment fund, and you said it's 4.5 is our interest. Okay. For example, once we give the money, if something happened and we need some fund, if we have any to spend that money, are we going to get the money from that interest? Are we allowed to take that interest, or is there a certain time?
Mm-hmm. First, let me back up a bit. The 4.5% is called a spend rate, and it's not actually the earnings or an interest rate, and often people do confuse it with that. That is basically the 4.5% means you can spend out of your fund balance 4.5%. As far as a growth rate goes, when we're investing it over a long term, probably 5 or 6 years, we're averaging about 6 to 7%. Probably if you do it on a yearly basis, it's closer to 4 or 5% per year. So your fund is growing, but as your balance gets larger every year, you can spend 4.5% of that. So the 4.5% is not exactly based on what your earnings are. It's just based on the balance as it gets larger. Currently, we are limited to the 4.5%, and that amount is really set by federal regulations. Those who are financial folks may have heard of UPMIFA or UMIFA, and there's a max of 7% that endowed funds are supposed to disperse out. So that includes admin fees and a spend rate. So maximum, we could never allow a fund holder to disperse more than 7%. However, if there were to be an emergency or unusual circumstance, I'm sure our board would certainly approve if you needed to spend more than 4.5% for some project or some need in the community. That certainly could be discussed, and I would probably assume most likely approved by our board. But in general, we are staying to the 4.5% per year, and that's just to help ensure that your fund will continue to grow and that you're not eroding the fund in the first place, and so that it starts to shrink. Thank you.
Chair Burns, I have a couple of questions.
Please go ahead.
Thank you for coming.
Yes.
I have a few just pointed questions, I think. The non-endowed funds, then, they do not grow? Is that?
That is correct.
Okay.
They will only grow through donations.
Oh, through donations?
Yes. So
Okay.
donors are allowed to make gifts to that fund at any time. And then we would handle any of the acknowledgments on that. Or if your commission would like to do that, you're welcome to. But we would automatically just issue a receipt. There is a 6% charge, though, on every donation that does come in onto an endowed fund. But there is no other charge ever issued.
And did I hear you say that if you don't spend the 4.5% one year, it rolls over to the next year?
Yes, you as a commission would have an option to either roll it over so it gets added into the next year's spend rate, or you could also make a decision to roll it back into your principal.
Okay.
Wanted to do that.
And then my last question is, since the endowed fund does grow, or is subject to market forces anyway, does the principal stay the same, or is there a possibility that because it's subject to market forces, you could actually, the amount could go down?
Absolutely, the amount could go down. Absolutely. But the spend rate that's calculated annually, we do that at the January 1st of each new year. Whatever your spend rate is for that year, that will not change as the market fluctuates for that year. That's already been set for that year.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Chair Burns, could I address a couple of questions?
Yes, ma'am.
So there is no minimum mandatory annual spend?
That is correct. Mm-hmm.
What happens to the endowment? We've been through this process recently of transformation on this commission to quarterly meetings and a more policy-driven agenda. Permanent is kind of a scary word. So my question is, things could change. Hopefully equality for women and girls will be achieved across the board, and the work of the commission will become, in some years' time, completely redundant because equality between men and women will be fully achieved. At that point, if the commission is disbanded, what would become of the endowment? In other words, if the donating organization, which I assume is the commission, no longer exists, what happens to the endowment?
And that's an incredibly good question. Thank you. I would assume that maybe the city may want to, I don't know really what the bylaws are within how your commissions work, but perhaps within the city, the council or someone could make an overall decision to say, okay, great, we don't have to deal with women's issues anymore, but this issue has now come up, and you can certainly change the purpose of that fund. The other option is that if everyone is hands off and they want to give our board of directors 100% variance power on how the fund is used, our board would then be entrusted to make the best decision. They would have to find a need similar in the community to the original need if it was no longer valid, but try to apply it to something that would be somewhat similar and to continue to use it in that way.
It's very good to hear.
Mm-hmm.
Who determines how the funds are invested?
We actually use an outside investment company. It's Morgan Stanley Smith Barney. We do have a investment policy. It's considered very conservative. We call it a 60-40 blend. We do use a lot of global global equities. It's somewhat a conservative growth, but over a long-term period, it tends to do well. So Morgan Stanley Smith Barney has to act within our investment policy, which is governed by our board and which is reviewed every year or so by our board of directors.
Would it be open to the review of the commission?
Our investment policy, we certainly would be more than happy to share that with you, absolutely. However, it's not set up where someone from the commission could call and make investment decisions, because we have two pools of investments, and basically everyone's fund, which would be your fund, Mr. Smith's fund, maybe the school down the street has a fund. It's all pooled together, and they're all invested based on our policy.
Yeah, my thinking is just that we would want to make sure that our funds are invested in ways that reflect the aims and goals of the commission.
Oh, I see. Got it. Absolutely, we would be more than happy to share that with you if that's something you'd like to see. Mm-hmm.
Thank you.
I have some questions, Chair Byrne. My question goes to the amount of the $93,100. Does it have to be the entire amount is endowed or not, or could we as a commission make a decision to endow a portion with you?
Unfortunately, that wouldn't be possible at this time. You could theoretically actually set up two separate funds. You could have a non-endowed and an endowed if you wanted to split the amount. But because of our investment, we invest one in an endowment pool, and we have a non-endowed pool, so we can't have just a portion of a fund. They would literally have to be split. But we do have some donor advisors that have two funds with us, an endowed and a non-endowed, so that's certainly an option.
And I have just two more questions, and I want to circle back to Ms. Powers. Is our only option to go with the community to go this route, or can we not go this route at all?
Vice Chair Miller, members of the commission, as stated in your alternatives, you have options. You can choose to take the whole fund balance over. You can make any other suggestion that's not proposed by staff.
I saw those options. What I'm specifically asking you is what happens if it stays within the city? Status quo, exactly where we're at today?
Nothing happens.
Okay.
The benefits of possibly moving it over is being able to accept future donations and endow it investments. But at this point, no. There's no rush, push if the money stays stays at a flat balance.
If I may have one last comment, Chair Burns, I guess what I want the rest of this commission to know, at least where my position is we're all trying to come up with the best term. I'll just state where my thoughts are, and then wherever we collectively come together as a group and think is the best is really how it goes. But what is so appealing about what you offer is the longevity, the security, and all of those things, and that certainly goes without further deliberation and discussion. What's concerning to me, having been on this commission when we were actively raising funds and knowing and being a very active fundraiser as in that role, I am struggling with 4,100 when there are so many, that being our distribution power, when there are so many needs specifically that we could address in the short run in 2015, which is why I asked the question of two funds, right, so that more actively we could get the money into the programs that serve the women, align with other very reputable women's groups and men's groups in our community that are really forward-thinking on the needs of women, of girls and women, so that we could get some money actively out there. There is $93,000, and we could really, maybe there's a real need for that. So that's the part that's appealing to. It's hard for me to just lock it all up.
Right.
Completely, and if there were options around locking up a portion, a larger portion, I'm not even trying to keep out, a significant amount, but 4,100 is not palpable, I think, in terms of what really is going to make a difference in the lives of some particular women and girls for the way the money was raised.
Right, and you yourselves know best what you need to do and what you have been doing. I think in my initial conversations with Commissioner Burns, too, we just threw some figures around, and I had happened to ask, what have you been doing in the past? And, it seemed to fit within the parameters of what you may need to put out. But I totally understand what you're saying, and that's where the option of having the two funds would be workable. Because in your non-endowed, you could spend as much as you might need per year. On the endowed, as it's growing, your disbursement from the endowed actually could be used to then go into the non-endowed. We could transfer it into the non-endowed. So the endowed can continue to grow and be that bit of fuel that could also go into the non-endowed that you would be actively working with and spending from. So there are different options that we certainly could look at in that respect.
May I ask a question, Chair Burns? The question I have is obviously an advantage to this is the ability to receive endowments. And my question is, how likely is it that the Commission would be the recipient of such endowments? And how do you go about, do you solicit them or make them available, lists available, or how does that work?
We do have a list of all of our funds, and when I'm meeting with donors in the community, sometimes they may even ask, they're maybe not so interested in opening up their own fund, but they may want to say that we talk about what funds do we currently have, and maybe the plan is when they pass, they would, rather than starting their own fund, hey, there's a Commission on the Status of Women fund, I would really, then just bequeath the money there. That has happened. I think it's one of those things that you can never predict. I have no idea how many might be in the pipeline out there. We are constantly working on endowed and estate type gifts because that's really is the impetus, I think, with creating more of a perpetual future in all of this. But our funds are listed on the website. I could say we could probably do a better job. We are updating our website. We are always trying to communicate the different funds and ways to give to those in the community.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Chair Burns, may I ask one more question of staff?
Yes.
Ms. Powers, if the money is locked up in an endowment, then what would it look like, or where would this commission be able to obtain monies for a report on the Commission on the Status of Women? If that's in one of our goals in the strategic plan to say a year from now to put out a report, would it be free? Is the city giving it to us for free?
It would depend on the Vice Chair Miller, members of the Commission. That would depend on the costs associated. If it's costs such as printing and distribution, those are costs that are administratively absorbed anyways. Those funds do not come out of the Commission on the Status of Women. They never have. If it's paying a professional to do so, that would be a different story. The Mount St. Mary's report is an example. Staff's understanding is that Pasadena was able to work with Mount St. Mary's and extract some information. Pasadena has told us that that was done at no cost to them. I know there's still some concern over whether Mount St. Mary's will, at some point, if this becomes something that they do with other commissions in other cities down the road, if they will need to start charging, that is something that we can look at. But the other alternative to the Mount St. Mary's report would be working with some local schools, trying to get an intern on board to help collect the data under the direction of the commission and work with staff to put something like that together. So not quite sure how much money the commission would need, if they would need any money for a report, but that is something that might want to take into consideration.
To discuss. Any more questions?
If I could
Yes,
approach the commission, I just wanted to add again, thank you so much for the opportunity. We're just here to provide that information. If you decide to do something else, that is perfectly fine, or further on down the road, if you decide to bring up the conversation again, or if you're ready to open up a fund tomorrow, we're ready to work with you. Also, when you do have a fund with us, we issue quarterly reports. And so with a quarterly report, you would be able to see any of the earnings or income coming into that fund, as well as any of your disbursements going out. So, and we probably would be sending that to, a designated person here, whether it's on the commission or with the city of Glendale. But we do have quarterly reports then that would show you a picture of what's happening with your fund.
Edna, how long do you think the board will take to perhaps look at a third option?
We are slated to probably do that this summer. We're right in the middle of just ramping down on a few things, and we were going to use the summer to kind of retake a look at what we call our matrix, is really what it's called. So our matrix reloaded, but...
and what do you think that's going to look like?
The discussion has been that we need to have another option in addition to just endowed and non-endowed. And in the past, we actually had other options. It's just back in 2008, 2009, due to a restructuring that we were under, we had to kind of pull things together, and due to a database that we had just implemented, and that's where we went into just the two options only. So it's not unheard of to have more, than two options. It's just that we need to now revisit that. And I think what it would be is something a little more flexible. I think one of the concerns, as Commissioner Miller brought up sometimes, is that people do feel, what if something happens and I'm locked into this 4.5%? Because we can't really predict what the future might be. So I think having that little bit of a flexibility, perhaps in the spend rate, or possibly reverting to maybe a hybrid, what we call not quite an endowed, quasi-endowed fund. There's different options. So that's all I can really tell you right now, because it's really going to be up to our board and kind of how they see our future and how can we better serve the community.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Ms. Powers, where do we go from here?
Chair Burns, that all depends on the desire of the commission. This will be, certainly, if you're not ready to make a decision today, this is tabled until the Community Foundation of the Verdugos brings a more definitive answer on the flexibility and having some sort of hybrid if the commission's not feeling comfortable at this point to move forward with fully endowing the funds. Split it, but it seems like there's still some things up in the air, so it's really at your desire whether you want to take action on this now or perhaps wait for additional information a couple months down the road.
Is it appropriate at this time to ask, for example, Commissioner Kajayan what her thought was on it?
When I was reading this report, I found out that this Community Foundation of Verdugo, if we put our money in endowment fund, as from my understanding, it is a prestige for our community, because when we are asking donations, this is my thought. When we are having fundraising, we were having difficulties to get that fundraising. I mean, donations. But if we say we are going to use this donation and we are putting endowment for women's issue and girls, I think we will have more respond to this. But I think we have to study more, as when I was hearing my colleagues what they are saying. But that's my thoughts. I think it's okay if we have this endowment fund with this organization, but I don't know what my other colleagues, they will think about it.
I'm going to go back and ask Commissioner Law.
I I'd really like to echo what my fellow commissioner is saying. Before I started my career in public affairs, I worked in fundraising for various nonprofit 501c3 organizations for about 15 years. And although I never worked for a community foundation, I know that community foundations generally have a very solid reputation in the communities where they do their work. I think it would lend great credibility to the fund itself to be housed rather than at a city, at a community foundation. And I'm concerned that if the funds are left at the city, which I don't think at this point is the intention of any of the commissioners, I don't get the sense that that's the way this is going, but if they were left for a long period of time at the city, the funds, as I understand it, are not invested and essentially are depreciating. So if the fund is sitting there, as the value of the fund is essentially not growing, but the value of the money there is in a sense depreciating. So I don't want us to tarry too long in making this decision. I think it's an important decision, and I think the sooner that the funds could be invested and start getting a return, especially if this representative from the Community Foundation is correct and it's a 6 to 7% return, that's a very high return rate. So we could invest the funds and within months see the value of that $93,000 increase without any effort being expended on the part of the commission. Simply investing it would be better than leaving it to sit and not grow. And I also think the fact that there isn't a mandatory minimum spend gives us, as the commission, flexibility. If we did have a year where we felt, let's say for the sake of the argument, there was some kind of issue or God forbid, a disaster that occurred in the community where we felt that there were, pressing needs within the community that needed to be met, we could spend higher one year and lower the next to make up for it, or the reverse. So I think there's some very positive reasons to consider this, and obviously this is an organization that would just raise the profile of the Commission on the Status of Women. Also, I want to add that potential donors really like endowed funds because they know that, especially if it's a legacy gift, if it's an estate gift, that money is going to be working in perpetuity for the cause that is dear to them. So the idea that it would be endowed, I think, is very important.
Commissioner.
Thank you, Chair Burns. I think that one of the questions I had was, does the balance in the city coffers grow? And I guess the answer to that is no. However, I think that the community of the Verdugos, did I say that correctly?
Yes.
Community Foundation of Verdugos. I mean, it seems like we're not even considering anywhere else, which makes sense. However, I think it probably makes sense to table this until the next meeting, especially if there may be a change over the summer, because some of us have concerns that it's not flexible enough, and we don't know if that spend is going to be sufficient for what we're doing now. It certainly sounds like it would be, but it seems to me that we ought to take advantage of the fact that there may be a change over the summer and then reconvene on this issue in August. We're not talking about putting it off for a long time, just a few months.
I've been involved in more than one of the foundations, and it's been always very satisfactory. I'm going to offer, I can't offer, can I? But my personal opinion at this point is we should postpone until August and strongly look at what has happened with the foundation between now and August. I don't like not earning interest. I really don't. The way I'm looking at it, every penny is going to count of that $93,100. So if we can take a peek in 3 months and hopefully we will know more about what you could offer, I would strongly urge that we leave the money with the city for 3 months until our next meeting, and ask you to come back again and give us anything new that you knew. That would be my thought on this. Can we call for a question?
Chair Burns?
Yes.
Do we want to have an ad hoc committee come back with a report in greater detail? Do we need more information? Do we want...
I don't know. I think she's given us everything she possibly could. And I don't know whether we can vote for just a 3-month period to put it aside. I'm not sure about that.
Chair Burns, no motion is needed if you're not going to take action on this and you're just requesting the item to come back with the updated information. That can certainly be the case. You don't need a motion for that.
That would be my suggestion. I don't know how the others feel about that.
Chair Burns, I agree with that. That was all of the questions that I asked were specifically to get us to that. I think there's a lot of things we all agree about this on this dais, and I think specifically in the details of some of the feedback that could come back could actually really be more helpful and better for this commission.
Chair Burns, I think you did have a comment down there.
Hi. So I heard that a concern was, what if we need money? I just wanted to know, like, a situation where we would need the money. Like,
unfortunately, I don't think I can think of one right now. Most of the 501c3s that I'm aware of seem to have a fair amount of money right now. I'm sure that there'd be a group or a smaller group that might be looking for $2,500 or $1,000. I don't necessarily see us handing out huge sums of money. I think that we're probably going to hand out our name. We're going to hand out support from the commissioners. So to me, $4,100 a year, or let it build for a couple of years, it's going to be plenty of money. Ms. Powers has already said printing and paper and stamps, that type of thing, if we needed that for a mailing, usually always comes from management anyway.
Yes.
Yes, is that correct?
Those are administrative funds. The funds that the commission raises are for programming, and it goes specifically to the mission and the vision of the commission and the activities that you carry out, or what the goals are to accomplish. So administrative fees like printing and mailing does not come out of the fundraised money that the commission has amassed.
Mm-hmm.
But again, for all intents and purposes, $73,000 endowed also does very well and gains interest and can do well, and $20,000 can serve a population right now immediately. So again, I don't think my argument isn't either or, but specifically, is there a happy place that really serves both needs? I mean, $93,000, if we just did nothing more, it goes out to 20-something years. Hopefully in 20-something years, as was indicated earlier, this commission might not, it might not be necessary. You know what I mean? So
hopefully.
Right. And so, again, there are options in there that could get us to both places.
Are there any motions at this point, or are we tabling this discussion?
Are we agreed to table this until August? I'm not goosebumps about this at all.
If you'd like to specifically bring this item back in August, then you would need to take a motion to bring it back to the August meeting. But otherwise, if you just want to continue it to a later meeting and staff working with the chair will bring it back in August, then we can certainly do that as well.
Is that what the desire is?
I think so, yes. Continue it.
Fine. Then we are asking to continue this till August. I'm not going to change my mind particularly, but I'm afraid we're going to lose a bit of money on interest. But I think we need to have that third choice. Because I'm certainly not going to be voting for anything as substantial as $20,000 to one group.
Do we need to have a motion?
Do you want a motion for that?
I think you were just looking to continue this item to a later meeting, and we'll bring it back.
That's good. And also, we might be changing. We might not be up here. Right? There might be new commissioners, who knows? So there would be. Thank you, Edna. Thank you very much for coming, and we'll see you in August. Please do.
Thank you.
Thank you. So we go back to
Next item.
the next item.
At 4 is nomination and appointment of delegate and alternate commission representatives for the Association of California Commissions for Women for the term of May 2015 through June 2016. At A is a motion to appoint a commission delegate for ACCW. At B is a motion to appoint a commission alternate for ACCW. Chair Burns, would you care for a brief report?
Yes, but there's already been a lady who has volunteered.
Yes, thank you, Chair Burns. I did volunteer to go to the ACCW meeting on June 27th. I'd be honored to be the delegate if the commission felt that was warranted.
And just to clarify, Commissioner Lambalot, that would be for the full term, so it would be attending the teleconference meetings as well, correct?
Yes.
How do we need to deal with that?
A motion nominating Commissioner Lambalot for the ACCW delegate would be.
So I need a motion
I so move.
and a second.
Yes, I second it.
A roll call, please.
Commissioner Kojayan?
Yes.
Commissioner Law?
Yes.
Commissioner Lambalot?
I believe I need to abstain? No, didn't I say yes?
Vice Chair Miller?
Yes.
Chair Burns?
Yes.
And in the event that Commissioner Lambalot cannot make one of the meetings, we would seek an alternate. Is there anyone who's interested in serving as an alternate?
I like to serve as an alternate.
Thank you, Commissioner.
You need a motion?
Yes, please.
I make a motion that we have Commissioner Kojayan be the alternate representative for this commission for the ACCW.
Second would be
I second.
roll call, please.
Thank you. Commissioner Kojayan?
Yes.
Commissioner Law?
Yes.
Commissioner Lambalot?
Yes.
Vice Chair Miller?
Yes.
Chair Burns?
Thank you.
Thank you.
Next item, please.
At 5 is consideration of proposed legislative platform for the Commission on the Status of Women, and at 8 is a motion providing direction on this proposed platform.
Yes, I would like a report on this item. Thank you.
Chair Burns, members of the Commission, as part of the Commission's role to serve as an advisory policy board to City Council, staff recommends that the Commission adopt a legislative platform to publicly state the Commission's position on issues regarding women and girls, and to provide a vehicle whereby their interests can be protected at the state and federal levels. A legislative platform allows the Commission to establish its position on legislative matters and serves as a foundation for the recommendations that it, as an advisory policy board, would make to City Council on whether to support, remain neutral, or oppose positions on state and federal legislation. Staff would then monitor the state and federal legislation based on the adopted platform and would provide information at each of our quarterly meetings regarding legislative priorities on proposed legislation. At that point, then, the CSW may make recommendations to City Council on specific legislative items for their consideration to take appropriate action when required in order to safeguard or advance interests of women and girls as it affects them here in Glendale. So the proposed legislative platform that's included in the report has been constructed based on the Commission's vision and mission, and there's about, I believe there's 5 points, which certainly the commission can add to, delete. At this point, this is what is there for your consideration. Please note that upon the platform's adoption, as mentioned, staff will track and review legislation, and typically with city legislative items, they are marked as either items are supported, opposed unless amended, or you just watch them because they are of interest. And any letters of support or opposition that go out from the city would be signed on behalf of the mayor, and they would come on behalf of city council and the commission on the status of women. And when the mayor's not available, it's the mayor pro tem or the city manager. Typically, majority of the letters are signed by the mayor. That concludes staff's report, if there's any questions.
Thank you. This item is open for discussion now. I believe that we should look at the 5 recommendations, and if any one of you wishes to delete or add, now is the time to do that, or accept. Go ahead, yes.
Could I ask
Commissioner
first,
Lau.
Chair Burns, and maybe this is best directed at staff, is the legislative platform an evolving document, or, I mean, how often is it revised? Is it something that you institute for a year?
Commissioner Law, members of the commission, we can set it for a year.
Okay.
We can set it for a year, or it can be until the commission wants to change it. It would be at the direction of the commission. Okay. It could be revisited annually. That is certainly at the pleasure of the commission. We can certainly do so. Okay. So we can set it for a year at this point if you'd like, and revisit it every year, or on an as needed basis.
Yeah.
Chair,
More discussion? Yes.
when I was reading number 4, women in military and military families, do you think we need to get involved in this? Because YWCA is more involved in this number 4.
I can answer that.
Yeah.
The YWCA is certainly involved in programming to help women in military and military families. What this legislative platform does is it allows the commission to express its opinions and concerns about legislation that is or isn't out there, as far as what kind of legislation is being crafted at the state and federal level for women in the military. So I believe the YWCA staff's interpretation is very much boots on the ground. What are they doing to help the women in Glendale who are veterans and part of veterans' families? What the commission is focusing on is legislation that is currently being crafted and how that'll affect these women in the future. So it's a little different. They're related but different.
Thank you.
Are there any other comments about the 5 recommendations?
Chair Burns, I think all 5 of these are actually very good and very well thought out and well written, and they really encompass a great deal of all the different aspects that affect women.
I have another question. Are we going to have a subcommittee to do this, or just for 5 of us? Are we going to have 2 of us subcommittee to discuss these things before general meetings? Because needs discussion, these issues.
Like what?
If we are going to discuss, for example, women's health, maybe I like to discuss it with, for example, with our chair, Byrne.
Do you mean an ad hoc
I have
committee?
some ad hoc committee, and before we come out to the general meetings, I mean, how we are going to discuss all this in our next quarterly meeting about exchanging ideas, or I think it's a little bit difficult. Yes.
I think, if I may, I think the issue is the question: can you discuss the legislation itself, or can
Yes.
you discuss general topics about the legislation? If it's the legislation itself, then it would be appropriate to discuss it at one of your meetings where everyone has the opportunity to provide input. If you're discussing it with one other commissioner, then that's certainly permissible, but there's no action or recommendation that a committee would need to bring forth. So it's you're having a discussion by the entire body and then making a recommendation to the city council. So then by adding an ad hoc committee, you're adding yet another layer of discussion, and it may be more appropriate to do it at a level with everyone present.
Okay, thank you.
And certainly if there's any specific legislation that any of the commissioners come across that they would like considered for the platform, those can be forwarded to the chair, forward them to me, staff. That's certainly doable.
Okay. It's clear now. Yeah.
It would just be, engaging in, entire email conversations with everybody about, let's all look at this legislation. What do we think about this one? But asking staff to look at it and categorize it as part of the platform, I believe, is something that can be done on an individual basis.
If I understood correctly, you said we can discuss this by email between, or?
I think what she's saying is that you can forward your suggestions to staff directly rather than having a full-on email discussion about the specifics of the legislation. So you can consistently forward information as you come across to staff to bring back for future discussion. So on an individual basis, you can do that consistently.
Okay, thank you.
May I ask a question, Chairman?
Certainly.
My understanding is not only, there'll be two ways that we would be able to take a position on legislation. One is if it's brought to Chair Burns or staff's attention. The other is staff is tracking the legislation and would notify us of anything that falls into these categories.
Yes, and just so you know, this staff person also acts as the legislative liaison for the city of Glendale, and I'm in direct contact with both our state and federal lobbyists. So certainly any platform that the CSW adopts will immediately be forwarded to our lobbyists, and they will certainly be bringing, in addition to staff tracking things, they will bring things to our attention that fall under the platform.
Thank you.
May I have a motion on this item?
Could I still ask a question?
Certainly.
I did think that the issues that are raised, the 5 issues, areas of concern regarding legislation that are raised in this document are very apt. The one that I feel should be included that's not here is to track any legislation to do with immigration. As many of us know, fully half of the people who live in Glendale were born outside of the United States. And I include in that number members of my own family. So immigration, I think, is a central concern to the citizens of Glendale, and especially for women and children, and particularly with the unification of families. So I would want to add immigration to the list. And policy or legislation that affects people who have recently arrived in the United States.
And certainly, I believe, Commissioner Law, trafficking would fall under that as well.
Yes, very much so.
That could be something. Would the commission want to add that? Seems appropriate.
Ms. Powers, would you then read the recommendations, including number 6?
Certainly. The topics for the platforms are as follows: women in the workplace, women's health, women in the budget, women in the military and military families, women in post-secondary education, and number 6 could be crafted to say women in immigration and trafficking. Women and immigration and trafficking, something to that effect. Immigration and trafficking issues relative to women.
Yeah, and if we could, I would like to include children because that includes girls.
Ms. Powers, are we ready for a motion?
Yes.
Who would care to make that motion?
I move to adopt alternative number 1, to adopt the proposed CSW legislative platform as presented, with the addition of number 6, which is immigration and trafficking issues relative to women and children.
And a second, please.
Second.
Roll call, please.
Vice Chair Burns?
Yes.
Oops, I'm sorry. I read that out of order. My apologies. Commissioner Kojayan?
Yes.
Commissioner Law?
Yes.
Commissioner Lambalot?
Yes.
Vice Chair Miller?
Yes.
Chair Burns?
What did you say?
Chair
Oh,
Burns?
yes, thank you.
My apologies.
That's okay.
Next item would be Commissioner and staff comments.
And you will read them into the record. Shall we start down here with student ex officio? Would you like to make some comments about your first meeting?
Sure. I was extremely nervous for this. I wasn't sure when not to talk, but after a while, my heart stopped pounding, and it's really nice hearing such mature things. Just being in high school, you don't often hear like such mature conversations, so it's nice to be exposed. And I appreciate again being appointed to be a part of this commission.
We're delighted to have you.
Thank you.
Commissioner.
I just want to say thank you to my fellow commissioners and to staff. It's been a pleasure. I don't usually get nervous about anything anymore, but I was slightly nervous about this tonight. So, but I think that I was very gratified and feel very rewarded that, to experience the synergy on the commission. Thank you.
Thank you. Commissioner Law.
I just want to extend a warm welcome to Commissioner Lambalot, and we're very lucky to have you, and thank you for being here. Earlier in the meeting, I held up this purple folder, which is the sort of cheat sheet for the report on the status of women and girls in California in 2015. This report was prepared by Mount St. Mary's University in Los Angeles. And it really outlines the key indicators for the well-being of women and girls in the state. Overall, it was, we have a tough road to climb as women. I think we probably all know that. That's why we're here. Some of the issues that are outlined in the report include equal pay. So, for instance, 84 cents. Woman earns 84 cents to a dollar earned by a man in the state of California. Very low numbers for women in elected office, on corporate boards, behind the camera in the media. There are more women earning college degrees than men. There are more women graduating from high school than young men. And yet, when women get out into the workforce, the numbers of women in high-paying professions and STEM fields are really remarkably low and not proportionate to the degrees that they're getting. So there's a lot of work left to be done. I do hope that the information that is in this report can be used in some way to come to bear on the condition of women and girls here in our city. I'm very grateful to Mount St. Mary's for preparing this report. I believe this is the 4th consecutive year in which they've done it. The event in early March where they presented it was very exciting. They had panel discussions, and the president of the university came out and presented the report. So there's a lot of energy devoted toward addressing these issues. I believe there were almost 1,000 people in the room at the Skirball Center when it was released. So it was a very exciting day. It was a very educational and informative event. But ladies, we have work to do.
Did you get more than one of these?
I did not.
Oh, well, we'll figure it out.
I'm sure there are more to be had, and I'd be happy to try and get more copies, and even see if maybe I could get a printed copy of the full report for the review of the commissioners.
That would be something that you would want to talk to Ms. Powers. I'm not sure that the full report, we could carry it. I think it's pretty heavy. There's an awful lot of wording in it. But surely part of it would be pulled out, or we could have it pulled out for Glendale, the part that works for Glendale, or is part of Glendale. Would you like to go ahead and say something to us?
Certainly. I just want to say I really appreciate this opportunity to be a part of this atmosphere. We can converse and really develop ideas, and I know I already have a tangible feeling that learning about ad hoc committees and just the difference between endowed and non-endowed, I'm looking forward to going home and reading more about it and finding ways to increase my own individual involvement in this committee. And after hearing Commissioner Law's opinion and optimism about how in a couple of years, hopefully that this commission can be redundant, that just was really inspiring, and I think that's just sums up the goal that we're all working towards, and I appreciate this meeting.
Thank you so much, Commissioner Kajoyan.
I would like to welcome ex officio Regina and Pauline. And I have a question. If anyone received the invitation from Armenian Relief Society about the gala banquet, which takes place this Friday.
I did.
Okay. I would
Yes.
like to know who is attending.
On my way here, I RSVP'd on behalf of me and Regina. Well, I mean, you still have to call, but I let them know that she was planning on going. We want to go together. So, yeah.
I called last, I think on Wednesday. So, yeah, we RSVP.
You didn't.
May I
Commissioner,
RSVP later? I don't know
Commissioner
what
Denise, did you receive the email? That it was sent from. Okay.
Yeah, we can follow up offline.
Okay.
Vice Chair Miller, please.
I would like to welcome Commissioner Lambolet. I would also like to, again, echo what our other commissioners have said and to welcome our student ex officios. It certainly is an honor to be on the dais, and especially grateful that it's a full dais. I want to echo some of the good work and that Commissioner Law identified, and really point us towards the good changes as well that come along, that become necessary and are needed, but also hoping that we continue to be very mindful of that which comes before us and find the best balance of integrating all the good work of all the commissioners that have been on this commission for 10 years into the work as we go forward with this new change. It certainly is a pleasure to be working with management services again. Christine Powers, thank you. It's always nice to be working with you. And last but not least, it would be, just because of the timing of the meeting, it goes without saying that a happy Mother's Day to all the mothers on this dais, and as well as a happy Mother's Day to many of all of our women in Glendale. And may we all continue to see how important that role is. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm not going to suggest that each one of us from October to now explain where we've been or what we've done or who we've seen or what functions we've been to. Every one of us have gone to many, many, many functions and represented the commission. So just to say that we all have been busy, we have all represented the commission and fielded a lot of questions, but I think this meeting should explain a lot of things, and so I thank you for all your thoughts, and I'm requesting a motion for adjournment.
I make a motion that we adjourn.
And a second, please.
I second.
The meeting is adjourned at 7:40 or thereabouts. Thank you very much.